Please tell me that I can't, that I won't, that I fail, that I'll never make it out, yeah. Please tell me all the bad, never good, fill my head full of every single doubt.
To the show. We are glad to have Week 1. We are honestly hours away from what we've all been waiting for since last February, the start of the NFL season. We've been chomping at the bit. We've been examining the information, looking at the stats. It's finally here. I am Chris Fox, and I have brought in NFL writer Adam Hulse, as we always do every week. Over at SportsKeeda.com, you're going to see a lot of the stuff that we're about to talk about, because we're going to pick Adam's brain about Week 1. We know you guys worried about your fantasy rosters. You guys are playing some DFS, and we're going to run through it with Adam because, frankly, Adam's pretty smart at this stuff, and he could probably help you win your league. Adam, it's Week 1. It's finally here. I know you're excited. I know you're ready to talk about this stuff. I mean, let's get after it, right?
Yeah, I mean, my two main thoughts about Week 1 is it's this same feeling every year of like when Week 1 finally gets here, it's like, oh my God, yes, it's finally here. While at the same time being like, holy crap, it's here already? You know, you kind of get those two feelings at the exact same time. And always remember with Week 1, whether it's your favorite team, whether it's your fantasy team, overreaction week is Week 1. When things go well, you're winning the championship this year. After Week 1, when things don't go well, you're throwing this season in the garbage. Happens every year in the NFL.
That's really what scares me a little bit, but in a good way, is the anxiety of the unpredictability. And when we went through each game schedule, we talked about this Week 1, and we gave a lot of teams wins and losses because it was Week 1. And we even used the phrase, if these two teams played each other later in the season, we might go the other way. But it's that unpredictability. Week 1, even Week 2, sometimes in a Week 3, like the rust is still there. The starters haven't really gotten a lot of reps against other teams because we don't want people getting injured. They don't play a lot in the preseason, maybe one or two series. And so this is really the first shot when people come out and start knocking the real rust off. So we need to kind of dive into this Week 1 paradox of honestly, who's a good play, who to watch out for, because it's not always the usual suspects as these guys are trying to warm up, right?
Like you mentioned that phrase, you know, if they played later in the season when we did our team-by-team series, and it was always connected to a word that we used often during that series, and that's continuity, right? Especially early in the season. It matters how similar things are Week 1 this year to how they finished last year. Teams who made a lot of changes to their coaching staff, to their personnel, to their roster groupings, to rookies coming in. A lot of times it takes a couple of weeks for that to kind of all come together. And when it comes to rookies, like I said, the overreaction week, this goes with it too. If you're someone who has Bijan Robinson on your team or Jordan Addison or, you know, one of those big rookies, and they underperform Week 1, don't panic. You know, like sometimes coaches and teams want to take a couple of weeks before they give this player what they're planning on giving him. So again, continuity, rookies, changes, most importantly, in September, that first month of the season, make a big difference.
I think you had at least 3 segues into our first team right there. You talked about changes, you talked about rookies, you talked about Bijan Robinson. Carolina at Atlanta, where everybody's watching. Bryce Young, of course. Carolina's going to be a work in progress. I went a little happy, but based on the schedule, on their win schedule, and then, of course, everybody's waiting to see what Bijan's going to do. Is it going to affect Ritter's fantasy points? Kyle Pitts is also in this game, and Dynasty will tell you this is his year. Carolina at Atlanta, do you have anybody that you want to play? Bijan, you know, how much time is he really going to get? How effective is going to be? It's his first game. Who are we playing, if anybody, in this one?
The Falcons are an interesting team because if you drafted Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, or Drake London on your season-long team, there's no way you're not starting them, right? Because of where you drafted them and the investment that you had in them, you have to start them this week. But if I'm going to tie that into, let's say, a DFS perspective, Bijan's not a guy I'm looking at all in DFS because he's a very expensive running back to own, and I'm not so sure he's going to get that massive workload right out of the gate. It might not be until game 2, 3, or 4 or something like that until the Falcons truly turn him loose. So he's not the kind of guy I want to spend a big salary on for my DFS lineup, but if you drafted him season long, you got him in either the first or second round, so there's no way you leave him on your bench.
Exactly, and that is predicament you get stuck in sometimes when you talk about these stars our players, look, Bijan's going in the first 2 rounds, guaranteed. You have to play your 1 and 2 round guys. I mean, you don't have a choice. Do you want to play Bijan? I don't know. It's week 1. It's his first game. You're not playing Bryce Young, and Atlanta has a horrible defense. This is actually a nice setup for Bryce Young, but I guarantee you're not playing him. You're probably going to play Bijan Robinson in this one. So it's just one of
you
those
have to play Bijan. But, this is part of the reason why I faded Bijan in pretty much all my drafts. And it's not because I'm down on Bijan. It's because I think he was getting a bit overdrafted, and people are all in on Bijan. He goes as high as a top 5 pick in some drafts, which to me was a little bit crazy for any rookie. I know his talent level. I really like Bijan as a prospect, but I really didn't draft him anywhere because I wanted the security of something that I felt like was a little bit more of a sure thing.
Bijan's not going to get the reps that he's going to get later on in the season. I mean, we can agree on that, right? We're going to see a lot of time in this one. We'll probably see some Cordell in this one. Bijan's going to get his reps. I'm not expecting a heavy workload. Maybe in the low teens, I think he'll hit double digits, but maybe not much higher than 13, 14.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if he got 15 touches, I think I'd agree with you. That'd probably be the high end of what we're going to see out of Bijan in this game. Maybe we're wrong, but I think that in week 1, it's going to be closer to a 50-50 split with Algier. That's just my opinion. That's the way I kind of see it going. And then as the year goes on, that 50-50 split will go to 55 and then 60 and then 65. As Bijan goes, I think it'll increase as the year goes on.
As far as DFS goes, I don't really see any plays that I want to get a hold of in this one.
Except maybe the only one is the Falcons defense, because it's Bryce Young's first game. The game's being played in Atlanta, a traditionally very tough stadium to play in, very loud. Atlanta's always a good home team. So that's a fun little DFS play that maybe a lot of people won't pick because it is Atlanta. Some value there from a DFS perspective.
I like that. See, that's why we have you here for DFS. Actually, a really great point. And you're right. I never would have probably made that connection, but it's a perfect connection to make. Minnesota's coming to Tampa, and Baker Mayfield's debut in Tampa. Minnesota's horrible secondary. Minnesota on the road, but we get some Justin Jefferson. Tampa's defense is kind of up in the air right now. You kind of get one or the other depending on who you talk to. They're going to be really good. They're not going to be really good, but it's still week 1. I like Rachaad White in this one as well. How are you seeing this game?
White and Madison, I'm definitely starting both of the running backs. If I can, I'm fading the Buccaneers wide receivers in week 1 until I see what it all looks like with Baker Mayfield, exactly how they're going to run this offense, what the distribution is going to look like a little bit. So if I have other options and I'm in a situation where I can bench Evans or Godwin if they're on my team, I'm going to. And I would say the same thing about Jordan Addison as well. He's not a bad option this week, of course, but if I have other places to go because of that same rookie factor, I can bench Addison for week 1. That's where I would leave him, but he's not the worst play.
Addison is kind of a gamble. I mean, when you get in that DFS world, you can kind of back yourself in a corner with how you spend your money. So you might get a decent value pick there with Addison, but you're right. I think personally, I would try to look somewhere else. Rachaad White, we know Minnesota's defense was not great. That might be a better, I've got a little bit of money and I need a play here. I might go with Rachaad White instead of Addison just because Minnesota's defense
he's like a middle valued running back in terms of his salary. And I agree with you with how bad the Vikings defense was last year. He makes for a just fine DFS type of play this week. You're not going to break the bank to use him, and he has enough upside. And same thing in season long. I really like Rachaad White for this whole year because I think that with Baker, they're going to try to lean on the running game and the running backs as much as possible. And Rachaad White's a pretty good receiver, too.
What about Kirk Cousins? I mean, obviously, if you got the Kirk Cousins-Jefferson stack, you're probably going to play Cousins in this one, depending on who your other guy is. Tampa's pass defense isn't super top-notch, but it is week 1. Do you feel comfortable if you had to play Cousins on this one?
To me, the way I see Cousins is that he's a very high-end QB2. So if he's your starting quarterback, that's fine. He can be a back-end QB1. Ideally for me, Cousins, again, like top of the line, one of the best QB2s that you can have. But in a matchup with Tampa Bay, that's not a bad matchup.
Tampa Bay, top 10 in pass defense, however, tied for second in allowing the most touchdowns at 29, 33, the only mark worse than that. Week 1, you might be okay there. I look for Jefferson to have a big game either way.
Don't we every
Tennessee,
week?
Yeah, kind of, yeah, I guess so. Tennessee goes to New Orleans. New Orleans, our pick for the NFC South. I don't know. This one, I don't see this one like being exciting. We're watching Olave. That's going to be the guy. Everybody wants to see how Carr is going to do in New Orleans. And Tennessee, I think, is a good game to start off with. In Tennessee, we're just watching to see if Tennessee can do anything at this point. I'm not sure there's a lot of plays in this one either. And
This is another one of those situations where obviously if you have Derrick Henry on your roster, he's starting, obviously. But this is not a good matchup for Derrick Henry. New Orleans is traditionally good against the run. New Orleans is traditionally very good at home, especially defensively. This game's in New Orleans. It's week 1. It's going to be loud. It's going to be crazy. From a DFS perspective, I'm not spending the super high salary it requires to play a guy like Derrick Henry in this kind of a matchup. For me, the guy to watch in this game is actually Jamal Williams, one of your favorite running backs, right?
Yeah,
Obviously, Kamara's out. Yeah, I mean, Kamara's out, obviously. He's suspended, and now Kendry Miller has this injury that just popped up as well, and he's a rookie. So being a little bit hurt, even if he does play, paired with the fact of being a rookie, they might give Jamal Williams a huge workload in this game.
To talk to your point on Henry, New Orleans 24th worst ranked rush defense. So look for Henry to have a nice day there. And here's a sneaky pick for DFS for me. Tennessee had the worst pass defense as far as yards allowed, tied for second with that 29 mark for touchdowns allowed. So I think DFS, you might get some great value with that Carr Olave pickup, especially Carr. You can spend money somewhere else. Maybe you can grab Henry if you put Carr in as your quarterback going against the league's worst pass defense last year. It's just a little point in the right direction, I think. For value, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad value. You mentioned Olave before, too. I do like Olave a lot this week. Derek Carr has been known to kind of like to throw that deep ball, right? And Olave is great at catching those deep passes. I think that's why a lot of people are so high on Olave in season-long drafts as well, because he had that promising rookie year with a bad quarterback. And now this quarterback change kind of seems to fit his style. You mentioned the Tennessee defense not being great against the pass either, so that could kind of be a recipe for a big game there.
Then we go to the AFC South. Man, we got Houston. Normally you think play everybody. It's at Baltimore. So you have Baltimore. And of course, I don't mean play everybody on Houston. I mean play everybody who's playing against Houston, but it's Baltimore. So Lamar's going to play. And I think everything else is a gamble from that point. You go Baltimore defense, obviously, with CJ Stroud's first game. Not a great offense in Houston. So Baltimore's defense, smash that. Lamar, you got to play because you took him early and he's probably your number 1 QB. But other than that, I don't think there's anything in this game.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I like Dobbins a lot this week. You know, DFS, he's kind of like a mid-price type of player. And, you know, if Baltimore jumps out to an early, pretty big lead, like, you know, they're kind of expected to win this one kind of going away, they could just, you know, kind of be running the ball a lot to keep that clock rolling. So I do like Dobbins as a DFS type of play.
Houston had the worst rush defense in the league last year. Gave up 25 touchdowns on the ground, gave up almost 3,000 yards on the ground. Worst rush defense by over 200 yards.
And then another little sneaky type of DFS play that I don't love, but if you want to go really, you don't have much money left because you spent a lot on bigger players and you're looking in the bargain bin, someone like a Nico Collins isn't a terrible DFS type of play. Because of that same reason I like Dobbins, I expect Baltimore to be ahead pretty much this entire game, which means that the Texans are probably going to have to pass the ball a lot. Nico Collins is dirt cheap. He could see some volume. I mean, you know, don't heavily rely on Nico Collins, but he is a sneaky cheap play if you're looking for someone in that really bargain bid.
Kind of a sneaky cheap play all season, I think. A lot of people grabbed him. I grabbed some shares of him when I could. Baltimore's pass defense was 26th in the league last year. So, I mean, yeah, sure, why not? That value pick. I only got a little bit of money left. Who do I grab? Oh, there's Nico Collins for like $5. Grab it.
He's one of those game script plays, right? Like, it's going to be expected that Houston's going to have to throw a lot, and Nico is probably going to be their most targeted receiver, you would think. That could be a recipe for a decent game.
And that's going to be one of those teams that we're going to have to wait and see who really emerges as number 1. I mean, we all think it's going to be Nico Collins right now, but we don't know what's going on in training camp. We don't know what kind of relationships are happening with the rookie. It's going to be who's going to rise to the top as the number 1 here. But right now, it's Nico Collins. So if you got a couple bucks left over and you need a receiver because you went big somewhere else. Nico Collins. Good. Colts and Jacksonville. I like this one, though, especially from a DFS perspective, because there's all kinds of value over here from the Jacksonville side. The Colts defense, of course, wasn't horrible last year, but they've lost some players. So they definitely dropped. They were 12th last year, still gave up 25 touchdowns, 12th through the air. Their rush defense was even worse. And so you definitely got some plays, I think, in this game.
Yeah, I mean, from an Indy perspective, I'm actually fading the entire Colts team.
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know how much Richardson's going to be able to throw the ball because, you know, he hasn't been able to do much of that in college. Obviously, his legs are attractive, but like with a guy like Richardson, I'm definitely taking a wait and see approach. I want to see what it looks like first before I go with Richardson. And then all the pass catchers, I'm definitely fading. And then their backfield, we have no idea how those touches are going to be distributed in their backfield. They have a lot of like mediocre to bad options at running back, and we don't know which one is going to be used the most or how they're going to distribute those touches. So the Colts in general, I'm just completely fading the Colts. For the Jaguars, you know, play the stars. Play Trevor Lawrence, play ETN, play Ridley. Christian Kirk is a nice little play. He's a little on the cheaper side now that Ridley's there. Oh yeah, Jacksonville defense, that's a good play for sure.
I like this game from the Jacksonville perspective, DFS or otherwise, for your fantasy team. Throw them all in. Cincinnati goes to Cleveland. We're going to finally get to see Deshaun Watson. I expect the Russ to still be there in week one. Not an amazing campaign last year. We expect a lot more out of him this year. You definitely do on your fantasy teams across the board, looking at how the ADP has gone up, and for good reason. I mean, he's got weapons. There's a lot of reason to think he can't do worse. He can't do worse than the last 6 games he had, so he has to go up. Of course, the problem is he's playing against Cincinnati, but it's week one, so you have a little opportunity there to take advantage of people not quite being at full speed.
Watson's another one. Like, I'm pretty high on Watson from a season-long perspective. I've, pretty consistently liked him more than you have in a lot of these shows that we've done, with how I think.
I'm coming.
Yeah. Like, you've come up from where you were from, like, a DFS perspective, especially, like, with this game. I'm kind of fading it in general. Like, I kind of want to wait and see with Watson. He's another guy who I think could get better as the year goes on. Late season, I kind of like Watson more than early season because I kind of just want to see how it all looks like first. And look, this is one of those AFC North rivalry games. AFC North is your division. These games are usually tough, physical, ugly, nasty, beat 'em up type of games, which often isn't really conducive to a DFS or high fantasy scoring type of environment.
And then on the other side, you got Cincinnati. We don't know if we have 100% Joe Burrow. And honestly, Cleveland had a top 5 passing defense as far as yards last year. Not the easiest draw. They've had some changes. They've lost some players, and so we can get that as well. Cincinnati, a fantastic rush defense, so that could hurt your Chubb value. This is just kind of a good matchup, and if it wasn't week one, it'd be a great matchup.
And that's kind of why I'm trying to fade this game wherever I can, because I think it's going to be more of like a low-scoring type of game. Again, just like a beat-em-up type of game. Here's the big question, too. I mean, is Joe Burrow playing? Bengals have not confirmed yet that Burrow's definitely playing in week one. They've been kind of very vague about that calf injury that he suffered, and we're all kind of assuming that Burrow's going to play, but are we sure he's playing?
If you're a Burrow drafter, a guy who took Burrow, you are definitely watching. The Bengals are still calling him day to day for week one. And do you want to play him? Do you take the gamble that it's all just a smokescreen, that he's just fine?
If you have a good QB2 on your roster in a good matchup this week, I think it's okay to leave Burrow on the bench. Given the injury, we don't know how severe it is, and this not exactly being a great matchup for fantasy either. So if you went strong on your QB2 behind Burrow, this might be the week to plug him in.
Honestly, Burrow's injury was a calf injury, and so, maybe he has to stay in the pocket, but I really expect Burrow to play. That's just my opinion. San Francisco comes to Pittsburgh. This is an amazing game 5 weeks from now. Week one, kind of the same thing that we just talked about with Cleveland Cincinnati. We're going to see some mistakes made. I think this will be kind of a low-scoring game. We'll see some shots taken just to see, so coaches can look and see what their QB QBs can do. I expect probably a couple unnecessary interceptions in this one. I mean, I don't see this being a very pretty game, and I really just kind of see both these teams testing things out. Again, another low-scoring game, but that's what I see from two teams that are expected to do well this year.
You know, that's exactly how I felt about this game when I looked at it prior to you just talking about it. But look, it's also your team. It's your Steelers. You would know better than me, so that makes me feel better about right. But that makes me feel better about how I felt about this kind of being an ugly, low-scoring, like not pretty type of game also. And, you know your Steelers better than I know your Steelers, so that kind of confirms it.
I guess the thing is, from a fantasy value especially, there's a lot of fantasy studs. There's a lot of guys that went early. I'm sure Najee went fairly early. I guarantee Pickens is on people's roster. Johnson's on people's roster. Purdy was a fantastic QB3 grab, I think. Ayuk is looking up this year. People gambling on Debo. And, of course, you got that one running back guy who's fairly decent, whatever his name is, CM letters and stuff. So, I mean, there is talent. There are guys that you want on your fantasy roster. I just don't know if this is the game to play them.
I agree with you 100%. There are a lot of season-long guys that I like on both of these rosters, a ton of guys with a lot of upside. But from, just this specific game, this isn't the game I love any of.
On the flip side of that, I've got the Rams going to Seattle. Seattle, one of those teams that I actually believe I have them going to the Super Bowl this year, if I remember correctly.
Sure,
but one of those teams that I'm really watching, and they get the Rams, who really haven't shown us anything. So normally you would have to play Cup because you're driver. Now you don't have to play them, so you don't have to play any Rams players. And I would, on the other side of the ball, Seattle. For DFS, I think you might get away with a value pick at Seattle. I love Geno, especially this week. I can argue the other side of that and say, hey, the Rams aren't bringing a lot, so Seattle can test every system they got. They can test all their plays. They can try everything out. This is the game to do it. And so maybe nobody comes out big.
Like the last couple games that we talked about kind of being like ugly and not like conducive for fantasy, I feel the opposite about this game. Like, I love all the Seahawks this week from a fantasy perspective. I'm playing Metcalf. I'm playing Lockett. I love Walker this week. I'm really high on Kenneth Walker in week 1. I think he's a great target for DFS. Seattle defense is an excellent target for DFS and for regular lineups as well. You can plug in that Seattle defense because the Rams really don't have much. I don't think Kupp's going to play week 1. I don't think he's playing at all this week. So, I mean, their receivers, we're talking Dan Jefferson is their top receiver, Tutu Atwell. Like, these are the guys that they're rolling out. Now, DFS-wise and even season-long-wise as well, because of all that, without Kupp, people are talking about Van Jefferson and this and that. To me, the guy to play this week on the Rams is Tyler Higbee. He has had a consistently strong role as a tight end. He's a guy that Matthew Stafford trusts. And go look at the Seahawks' numbers last year against opposing tight ends. They were absolutely abysmal guarding tight ends. So with likely no Kupp, not a whole lot of places for the Rams to go, the Seahawks being terrible against tight ends, love Tyler Higbee as a play this week.
That's interesting, and I'm glad that you bring it up. Talk about those tight end numbers, because those are the things that you do have to look at. Of course, it's week 1, so we're going to see, what we get still, but that's a fantastic point, because I wouldn't have played anybody. But again, value pick, especially from your DFS perspective, spend a little money somewhere else and grab a cheap Tyler Higbee. I like it. Arizona at Washington in the game nobody wants to watch, not even the fans. You could actually have some really good fantasy value here because Arizona's defense is absolutely horrible. Arizona's entire team is absolutely horrible. Washington defense is pretty great. So you could really see Washington players kind of pull down numbers that they shouldn't because they're playing such a crappy team.
I do agree. I mean, Washington defense is a great play this week, obviously. It's one of the top defenses to play in week 1. For position players wise, I mean, I guess I kind of like the Commanders running backs in this one, but even that, I don't feel great about either one of them, Gibson or Robinson, because the Commanders have not been clear about how those touches are going to be distributed. It kind of looks like a 50-50 split right now, which could mean it's one of those situations where they go with the hot hand. If that day Robinson's running well, he might get more of the carries and vice versa with Gibson. There's nobody on either one of these teams that I love from a fantasy perspective this week, or really season long in general, mostly because both of these teams have a disastrous quarterback situation that is completely unknown right now.
I really like McLaurin and Dotson in this one because I think as long as Howell can get the ball to him, and he will, I think he's gonna throw some picks. It's gonna be a completely ugly game. I think both those guys could really put up some big numbers against such a horrible Arizona defense. So I do like both of them personally. Admittedly, as I said before, you are more the expert. Adam Hulse, NFL writer for SportsKeeda.com. Let's go to Giants and Dallas. Dallas going to the Giants. That's correct. I actually think you could get some value out of this game. I think there's actually some plays here because I think both these teams, again, are going to be trying stuff out, but more in a positive manner. And I don't think, obviously, Dallas has the better defense, but both these teams, they play each other tough. I think you could get some numbers out of this one. I don't know. That's just me.
I agree with you. I like a lot of players in this game from both season long and DFS perspective wise. Obviously, I'm a Cowboys fan, and two things that they have struggled with in recent years is slowing down the running game and covering tight ends, which that works perfectly for the Giants from a fantasy perspective, right? Like, this is one of those games where Saquon could be big, and this is an ideal first game for Darren Waller with his Giants. Both of those guys, I think, are absolute stud starts this week, right towards the top of the running back and tight end rankings. And then from the Cowboys side, I mean, you're obviously starting Lamb, you're obviously starting Pollard. The stars look great in this one. So, like, if you have those guys on your teams, this could definitely be a pop week for a lot of those big name players.
Yeah, look, the Giants number 27th against the run this year. Everybody's looking big at Pollard. What's he going to do? I like Pollard a lot this week against the Giants. I think Jones is probably going to get some rush yards.
Yeah, I mean, I love Pollard in this game. You know, I love Pollard for season long. I've said it all off season. Pollard's ceiling is RB1 in fantasy. That is his ceiling this season. If he can stay healthy and he can handle a full workload of a full season, which, look, he's never done that before. Like, he emerged above Ezekiel Elliott last season, but he has never had a full season long full workload. That is a lot on a running back. I'm not saying he can't do it. We just haven't seen him do it yet because he's never been asked to do it yet. He's going to be asked to do it this year. If he can handle it, RB1 ceiling.
Philly at New England. This one's interesting. Philly had the best passing defense last year. Of course, we know New England's defense was fantastic last year as well. This is honestly a tough game for Philly to walk into, but we're going to see how good New England's defense is. I don't know if this is one. I mean, you're going to play Hurts for sure. You're going to play AJ. I don't know. You're going to play Ramondre Stevenson from New England, but whereas you may have bought a lot of stock in the New England defense, I don't know if this is necessarily the week to play him. The Philly defense, however, smash, because Mac Jones is going to Philly might get 1 or 2 touchdowns on defense this week. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you just said. Philly is one of the top defensive plays of the week. And then from a fantasy perspective, I think this week, at least for me, is pretty straightforward. You know, Eagles, Hurts, Brown, Devonta, you're obviously starting those three. I'm not starting any of their running backs until I see how that backfield distribution is going to play out. From the Patriots side, the only guy I'm playing this week is Ramondre. I can't do Zeke yet until I see what kind of role he's going to have. I'm not interested in Juju or any of the other wide receivers. Tight ends, definitely not playing their tight ends. But I will say from a season-long perspective, as a sleeper late-round tight ends, I do like Mike Gesicki this year.
I kind of do too, and people are down on him. I'm not really sure why. I don't, he's not going to Gronk out or anything, but
because with the Dolphins last year, he did absolutely nothing. But I think that was kind of by design in the Dolphins offense. They just didn't throw it to their tight end. All their passes went to Tyreek and Waddle, as they should, right? That's where all of their passing went to. So Gesicki had such a down year last year that people are, completely off of Gesicki. And I understand that, but he's with the Patriots now. You know, Bill Belichick loves his tight ends. He's still a very good receiver. So, again, as a late-round dart throw, tight end 2, give me Mike Gesicki all day.
Yeah, I put him in that Higbee category. I think I still put Higbee first, but if you're going for that cheap, I only got a couple bucks left. He might be someone you could find some DFS value with. Miami at the Chargers. We're going to get to see Tua. It might be the only game you get to see him, so watch this one. I hope that's not the case. I hope Tua plays all year. I really do. This should be an awesome game. DFS or fantasy-wise, I say play them all. I know Miami's got a decent defense. I think they're improved. I think they're going to do well, but it is in LA, and so that opens it up. I see pass yards galore. I see offense galore. If you have Miami, Tua, Waddle, Hill, Herbert, Allen, even Williams, obviously Eckler, play them all. Don't play any defenses in this game. Don't touch your defenses with this.
100%. This is the game to target. If you look at the betting lines this week, this game has the highest projected total by a pretty convincing margin as well. Like, this is supposed to be the shootout of the week. Everybody looks good for fantasy. Everybody looks good for DFS. A guy like Quentin Johnston, if you're looking to not spend as much money on, a guy like Keenan or Williams or Tyreek or Waddle, he has a lot of upside at a very cheap price. I know he's a rookie and we don't know how much he's going to touch the ball, but I see this as an up and down the field type of game. They're both going to be passing a lot. This is the kind of game for your DFS lineup that the guys you have to spend big on, it's okay to spend big on Tyreek, on Waddle, on Eckler. Pick at least one of those guys. Maybe pick two of them if you can fit them into your lineup. Like, this is the game to spend big on.
Air raid. This is going crazy. I can't wait to watch this game. On the flip side of that, Miami and Chargers being a game where you can play everybody, got to be quite a bit more cautious when Buffalo goes to the Jets, basically same place, and Buffalo and the Jets get to face off in week 1. I will say that Aaron Rodgers typically doesn't start off very well, but he does have Garrett Wilson. Buffalo is your pick to go to the Super Bowl, and it's kind of one of these games where you have two powerhouses, so don't expect a ton of points either on the board or on your fantasy roster.
Obviously, you're starting Allen and Diggs if you have them. Obviously, you're starting Garrett Wilson if you have them. Those are the three guys from this game that you're starting no matter what. There's nobody else in this game that has to be a starter for any fantasy lineup. James Cook has been a great speculative type of fantasy pick this year because it looks like he's going to get an increased role. I'm not jumping to making sure I have him in any lineup right now because we're not sure what it's going to look like, and he's playing a very tough Jets defense. The rest of the Jets receivers, I'm definitely fading this week outside of Garrett Wilson. And if I'm starting a Jets running back this week, it's Dalvin Cook. I think Breece Hall will get more touches later in the season. I think they're going to rely pretty heavily on Dalvin early in the year. So Dalvin's an okay running back play this week. Not one that I love, but you could do a lot worse than Dalvin Cook this week.
You are the DFS expert as far as this show is concerned. Personally, I'm not putting a single player from this game in a DFS roster. I'm not spending any money because they're going to be expensive, and this is not a game where they're going to get you a lot of points, in my opinion.
I agree with you 100%. From DFS, I want no part of this game.
Green Bay goes to Chicago. You could get sneaky on this one because we know the NFC North is not great on defense. I would gamble to say that Green Bay probably has the best defense, but that's not saying much. So you're still in the bottom end of the league as far as defenses go. Just because Green Bay has the best doesn't make them good. I think Fields is probably going to get a lot of yards. Fields is going to get you rush yard points, even though they are trying to back off him. We're going to find out what Love does, so I'm not going to touch him in this one, even though Chicago's defense is absolutely horrible. It's one of those games that we're kind of watching to see what happens, and at the same time, at the end of this one, we're not going to know that much more than we did going in because the quality of the matchup isn't there.
Yeah, to me, this is a fade game all the way because both of these teams are wait and see kind of teams, with such big changes and whatnot. I don't know. I kind of want to see how both teams look before I really love anybody on either team. The one guy I do really like in this game is Aaron Jones. The Bears defense, obviously not very good. With the, transition to Jordan Love, I think it's pretty positive that the Packers are going to try to run the ball a lot. Aaron Jones, also a great receiver out of the backfield. He could be that easy check down completions for Jordan Love. So Aaron Jones is a guy that I'm definitely looking at for DFS. If he's on your season-long team, you're obviously starting Aaron Jones, but he's a kind of DFS play that I'm looking at.
Yeah. Detroit at Kansas City. Both teams expected to win their division. I think at least Detroit is the fan favorite. Kansas City, of course, is the smart favorite. How do you see this one?
Well, I think Kansas City is going to win this game, obviously, and I think that Kansas City is going to win this game kind of big. From a fantasy perspective, definitely love Amon-Ra because I think that the Lions are going to have to be throwing the ball a lot. Someone like a Josh Reynolds is kind of a sneaky play in this game. If you're looking for the bargain bin in this kind of game as well, he is their wide receiver too right now, and he had some good games last season. In a game against the Chiefs where you're expecting them to have to throw the ball a lot, Reynolds could be a sneaky good play this week. When it comes to their backfields, it's a difficult situation with the Lions backfield. Is there another one that we have no idea how the distribution is going to look between Gibbs and Montgomery? My gut tells me that, like with a lot of these rookie situations we've been talking about, that the Lions will probably lean on Montgomery more early in the season, and then as the year goes along, continually increase Gibbs's touches. That's how I see it going, but there's no guarantee to that. They might come out in week 1 and heavily rely on Gibbs, so it's hard to trust either of them right now until we know how it's going to look. But if Gibbs is on your team, you're obviously starting Gibbs. As for Montgomery, he's probably starting as well if he's on your roster. But if you can go another direction, maybe you want to go another direction.
Yeah, Lions are horrible on D. Play all your Kansas City guys. You are going to anyway. Kansas City running back room is cheap DFS players. You pretty much said it all. Kansas City's going to dominate this game. Play your Kansas City players, play your Detroit offense players, and see what happens. It's week 1. So anything could.
Definitely has high scoring written all over it, right? So this is like a good fantasy type of environment for points. You mentioned the DFS with the Chiefs running backs. Now, this is a risky play. It's also a super cheap play, but one that I kind of like is a sneaky, super cheap dart throw. What about Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week? Pacheco is going to be their guy who's going to be doing most of the running work, but maybe not in week 1. He is coming off of that shoulder injury. They might be a little bit patient with Pacheco because they have these other guys. And obviously, McKinnon is much more of a receiving back than a running back. So sneaky, cheap play who I think has upside, not really from a season-long perspective, but from a week 1 perspective, maybe it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
I'm not mad at it. I'm not a huge CEH fan, but I mean, like I said, you're the guy as far as the DFS goes. I trust you.
I mean, Pacheco hasn't really done much of anything during, this offseason. He hasn't done a whole lot because he's still recovering from that shoulder surgery. So, I mean, are they eager to just give him a full workload in week 1? I mean, I'm not so sure that they are, especially if the Chiefs kind of jump out to a big lead, right? And they start running the ball. Maybe it's Helaire that they feed early while Pacheco, fully recovers.
I expect 3 solid from Mahomes. Las Vegas at Denver. Garoppolo makes his debut. The Sean Payton era begins. We actually have Las Vegas winning this game, and I'm a little more comfortable with that with Judy being out now. Do we have any plays here? We're both kind of fading Adams. We're fading Jacobs, but again, it's week 1 fantasy. Denver does have a great defense, or they did last year. I don't know about this. There's plays here, but I'm not as confident.
This is another one of those games where I'm kind of fading everybody that I can fade in this game. I don't like the quarterback change with the Raiders going to Garoppolo. I think that's detrimental to some of those players' fantasy value. And then with the Sean Payton effect with the Broncos, we don't know how that's all going to look either. There's nobody I'm like rushing to start this week from this game. Obviously, if you have Adams or Jacobs, they're in your starting lineup because you used the high pick to get them. This is a fade game for me as well.
We really don't know how the running back room is going to look in Denver. Denver does have a good defense, so that drops Jacobs' value a little bit, and so does Garoppolo for that matter, which obviously affects Adams as well. Maybe take a flyer on Mims if you want, or a flyer on Sutton if you had to. Hopefully you don't have to. Hopefully this is a game you can kind of stay away from. I would.
Mims, we both talked about he's a great bench stash in season-long leagues this year because of his speed, because of how he's looked during the offseason. He could be one of those breakout rookies, but he's definitely not a guy I'm rushing to start in week 1. because he also has a very low floor.
So that's the games for this week. We talked a little DFS. We talked a little fantasy players. Let's talk about the big plays per position just real quick. Quarterback, we talked about Carr because of their matchup with Tennessee this week. Who are the other, give me maybe one or two other quarterbacks that you probably want to throw in? Patty Mahomes is obviously one.
For me, it's Tua. I love Tua this week for season-long leagues, and especially from DFS. We talked a lot about how this Chargers-Dolphins game is probably going to be that high-flying, high-scoring game. Justin Herbert is very expensive as a quarterback, as he should be. Tua a little bit cheaper, which to me makes him the better option. In DFS, I love me a Tua Tyreek stack this week. Definitely think this is a great week to do that. So give me Tua this week in what should be a high-scoring game, and we've already seen in this Mike McDaniel Dolphins offense, he loves to throw the ball.
I throw Lawrence in there as well with that Indianapolis game. I'm going to put him in as a nice DFS play. At running back, We know you want to go Bijan, but it's week 1. I think he's not going to get the carries that you want. So from the running back perspective, where are some people that we're kind of looking at?
Yeah, I mean, my 2 favorite running backs this week is Aaron Jones and Kenneth Walker. I mean, I talked about why I like Aaron Jones this week and how I expect the Packers to lean on him, especially early to make things a little bit easier on the transition to Jordan Love. And then Kenneth Walker. He is still the guy in Seattle. I know they drafted Charbonnet, but Charbonnet's going to be their running back too. And it's also a rookie in week 1, which is a situation we've talked about that we kind of like fading. And in a game where I expect the Seahawks to dominate the Rams, they could be giving Walker a lot of carries, especially in the second half, to run that clock out. So Aaron Jones, Kenneth Walker, my 2 favorite plays there.
We also talked about Pollard and Barkley. We'll put them up there. And as some sneaky value picks, Dobbins and ETN. Again, going back to that Colts game, those are your guys that if you spent big somewhere else, you could maybe grab someone with. And I guess, we could put Henry in there. I don't know if I'll put him on the list, but if you're going to spend the money on Henry, you might be able to get, again, that ETN Dobbins save a little money area. So we're a wide receiver.
Well, I mean, I already said I do like the Tyreek Hill stack with Tua. That's definitely a play I like this week. All the Chargers wide receivers, for the same reason in that game. I mean, Keenan Allen, for sure, he should see a lot of targets. Mike Williams, always a great touchdown threat. And then Quentin Johnston, who's the cheap one of those 3. Usually, like fading those rookies in week 1, especially in like a crowded wide receiver room like that. But because of the projected game script of this game, and with the Dolphins having, pretty good cornerbacks, it could be Quentin Johnston who sees some value in this one. I like him as a value play from a DFS perspective.
Yeah, we're just going to put anything Miami, anything Chargers, go ahead and smash that. I think Olave works. I think those are really the big plays. That's where you want to spend your money. I mean, we could talk about some receiver options other places, but I don't know that we need to. If you're going to play DFS and you want the winner, spend the money on the Miami Charger guys, then start filling out the rest of your roster from there. That's how I see it this week.
Yeah, to me, that's a great strategy.
Thank you. That actually means a lot coming from you. Tight end.
Well, I mean, I talked about Higbee earlier in the show. Definitely like Higbee this week, especially if Kupp is not going to play. Obviously, Stafford already has trust in Higbee. Higbee's been a fairly reliable tight end over the last couple years in comparative to tight ends, right? Tight ends after the first couple is pretty much a wasteland in terms of, fantasy football value. Higbee's been okay. I think this kind of matchup against the Seahawks were absolutely awful against tight ends last season. I think this could be a great week for Higbee to have a pop game.
And then we talked about Waller and even Gesicki. Gesicki's probably going to bottom out for a league minimum, and so you could save some money to go for bigger players there. Defense, I think we could talk about real quick. Who are some of the defenses that we want to target this week? There's some kind of big plays, I think, at defense this week.
Kind of my 2 favorites this week are Seattle and Atlanta. Atlanta more so from like that DFS side, because I don't think a whole lot of people will be like eager to plug Atlanta's defense into their DFS lineup because, it is still Atlanta and they weren't that good of a defense last year. But with playing at home, they're much better at home. Playing against a rookie quarterback in his first NFL game in a division rivalry, the crowd's going to be loud. It's week 1, division rivals, rookie quarterback, a lot of reasons to like the Atlanta Falcons defense. And then the Seahawks defense, which, I mean, the Rams just don't have a lot that really threatens any defense if Kupp isn't going to play, right? Kupp is it. Higbee's a good complementary player. Akers is a pretty decent running back, but they're going to thrive more because of when Cooper Kupp is on the field. If Cooper Kupp's not on the field, the case can be made that the Rams have the worst wide receivers in the entire NFL.
That definitely could be true. We got Atlanta, we got Seattle. I like Baltimore this week. You talked about the rookies, and so I'm putting Baltimore and Jacksonville both up there as they're playing rookie. And
you could throw New Orleans in there too.
You kind of could. We'll do an honorable mention there for Washington just because they're playing Arizona, who is most likely going to have the worst defense ever. If you're running low on funds, Washington might be a nice value pick as well. So there you go. There's the week 1 show. We've got some fantasy players. We've got some DFS plays. It's going to be a little unpredictable. I'm excited to watch it. Of course, we all are. We're ready for this season to get underway, see how our fantasy rosters play out. Just remember, it's week 1, and so you're going to learn some things, but we're not going to learn as much as you want to learn because it's week one. But I think there's still some plays out there, and mostly I'm just excited and ready for it to go. Hey, Adam?
Absolutely. We talked about that overreaction early in the show, so I tell you not to overreact to anything that happens in week one, but I know everybody will anyway, and I'll do it too. It's just overreaction time.
As a waiver wire, maybe you don't get too heavy on it, except for injuries in week one. That's my advice.
Trade Bijan Robinson because he only got about 50% of the touches in week one. Don't do anything crazy with your fantasy team after one game. Relax. It's a long season. Give it at least a month before you make any big drastic decisions.
On the flip side, if you are the cool guy, go ahead and take advantage of the guys who are panicking after week one. You might be able to grab some easy trades for some pretty high value players for people that panic. Where you don't have to panic is every time you come to this show, because we got Adam Hulse, NFL writer for SportsKeeda.com. Go to SportsKeeda with a K, Keeba. Type in Adam Hulse, all his great articles. He puts them out all season long. Let me tell you, you want to win a league, start reading his articles, because he's got the info that you need. I am Chris Fox. We hope you guys have an amazing week one. Win some money on DFS. Let us know how much you won and who you won it with, and we will be right here with you all season long. We'll see you for week two. Let's go week one. NFL, I'm ready for some football. Be safe, everyone.